Welcome back to Worth the Effort Woodworking. This is going to be a bonus episode for Class 4 in our Start Woodworking series, which was a class where we introduced hand planes and chisel into the mix, and we built a toolbox to hold all the tools that we will be using in the course. I'm going to call this a bonus episode because really there is no lesson here. I'm just going to outfit the interior and decorate the exterior of this box for a set of tools that we're going to be holding on it. And after this series is over, this is going to be a gift to somebody, so I'm going to have a few different tools in my toolbox than you would in yours. So basically it's just a general idea of things that you could do to help organize the tools on the inside, because everybody's going to have a different setup, everybody's going to have a different preferences. The key things is you want to make sure that it's not going to be a permanent setup, and because of this design, the floor of this is not glued in, it's just screwed in, so you can actually remove that and reorganize everything if you want to any time in the future. This episode is just going to be kind of a demonstration of how I did mine. So come along, enjoy as we kind of work on the layout of a small toolbox. Now here are the main tools that I'm going to be giving away with this toolbox. Basically a set of chisels and some other stuff that can fit in a tool roll. We have a smoothing plane, a jack plane, and a jointer, and a block plane that going along with it. Saw wise, we're going to have that saw that we've been using in the course, plus the crosscut saw, the carcass saw, and I also have a ripping version of that same saw for tendoning. And I'm going to give them a dovetail saw and a flush cutting saw. Now the saws in my mind in a toolbox are the most delicate tools. You really don't want them banging around. A hand plane on the other hand, I have no problem, like leaving a tool roll right in there. If you can find a situation where a pocket is created by the tools just resting, that's perfect for tools like this. But I don't want anything banging into these. So that's my first thing, is to isolate the saws and protect them so that they won't get damaged. So my initial thinking, because this is the longest saw and I want to make it easy to get in and out, so the tip goes in here, what I want to do is create just an entire section for just this one saw, and then create maybe 3/4 of a box to enclose the other saws. That way I can prevent them from kind of rocking around. So what I need to do is position this saw all the way over this way, that saw all the way over that way. Take the difference from this saw from the handle over here, which is about 7 inches, and then from that distance 17 inches. So I now know I need a box that this side is going to be 7 inches and that side is going to be 17 inches. And I think it's important that it bumps up against this side so that I can anchor it here. And to do this, I'm just going to use some scrap pine that I had lying around the shop. Unfortunately, when I was transferring the footage for creating this, something happened and got corrupted. But I purposely just did the same joinery as we did the case right here. So if you want to learn how to do this kind of stuff, just go to part 3 of class 4 of the section. So right now, all I need to do is drop this saw in to gauge distance. Position this so it bumps up against there, and then this won't rack too much. Maybe square it up with something else that is square if we can. So I'll just use this box that is square. From there, we want to anchor this piece down to the bottom section. So I'm going to take a pencil and create an outline of it so that I know where I can put some screw holes. And don't forget along this wall right here. So now you can just line up your drill and drill through the bottom in a couple places right in the middle. That way whenever you screw it up from the bottom, you'll be hitting the middle of the board. And yes, I am screwing into my workbench. So that's the advantage of having a workbench with a cheap replaceable top that you just don't really care about. And once again, don't forget the side. Be sure to sand these holes flush, because there's always going to be a little bit of schmutz right there, and you don't want that propping the piece up. From there, I will just run a little bead of glue right down the center. Set the board down right on your pencil lines and just hold it for 2-3 minutes. Press down. After 2 or 3 minutes, you can just go have lunch and come back in an hour and screw it from underneath. But you want to give this glue about an hour to really set up. The issue now is anchoring the smaller saws so that they aren't going to rattle around into each other. So if we simply just place them in close to where they should be, then I should be able to use just a simple pencil mark in order to create some guides for some dowels. And if I bury just the head of this Forstner bit into it, it will not go all the way through this baseboard, and I can slide some 3/8" dowels into that. You just need to make sure you're dead up and straight up and down this way, not necessarily this way. Now you could glue these in, but I think they're secure enough as is, and if I don't glue them in, if I don't like this setup, or if I do a different saw selection, I can always just pull them out and change it up. An alternative to this would be putting a block of wood across it and sawing into it. I just wasn't too big a fan of that one because of cross grain stuff, and I don't think it would be as tight in this application. So these should just, when you're done with them, just drop them in there and they can just kind of rest on their own. That leaves enough loose room just to slide any other saws I have. I think that's pretty good. So now that I got the saws settled out, it's time to figure out the hand planes. And this was that original design I had, because I could get all 4 in here, and then I could position my chisel roll right like that to kind of anchor it all together, just to take up that space. An alternative would be to have them in this orientation, locked down like that. I could still fit a chisel roll in between right in here, but I might also be able to fit a drill in the same amount of space. That would leave an open area here. I could just put a small box and I can still create a shelf along top. So what would you do? Well, here's what I ended up doing. as I said, just a little finger pressure, and just hold it for a minute or two just to get that initial tack, and put a light coat of glue, and that's all you really need to do. You don't really need to tack them on very much harder. And if I ever do need to take them off, well, I can just take a chisel and snap them off. It'll actually break at the wood, not the glue line. You just sand it back down. That's just the base, so it's no big deal. So this will still be easily to rearrange. And I decided to do it this way simply because it left a little bit more of a box right here that I can put more stuff in. Overall, I think it left me more room. And speaking of box, well, in any toolbox, you're going to have some area that's going to be just for your junk. It's a lot of little stuff like dividers, little gauges, place to put your pencil, your drills, that kind of stuff. So if we could, since we now have a nice space right here that we could put a drop-in box, I think that'll be the next step. And this being a toolbox, let's just make it uber simple design. Now that box wasn't, a really complicated box. I'm not even going to call it a pretty box. But it kind of mimicked the same design that we did for the other aspects, so that's why I did it this way. The only difference was instead of putting screws in those cross pins, I put little brad nails. But the fact that you have brad nails coming in this direction and this direction, even though they are going directly into end grain, which we all know is the worst way to put a nail in, it's not the holding strength that we're really concerned with. It's that cross action, because the nails themselves acting like pegs prevent this thing from coming apart. And then for the bottom of it, I just had some 1/4 inch MDF for another project, so I just threw that on there. You can put anything you want. You can probably even put just cardboard down there and it worked just fine. So the key thing now is how are we going to get it to sit in this top section right here. And really, since we already have this as a brace for the saws, we can use that as one, and if we can keep a parallel ledge on this side, we have the other side. So to figure out this thing's height from the top section, you could just measure this distance up here and come up the side, but what I ended up doing was I wanted to mark this side over here, so I used my marking gauge and came down from the top, from this top ledge, lock that down, and then I can come over here and create a point, and that right there allowed me to reset this to that distance and mark a line all the way across. So now I have a parallel line to this edge right here. So I just need to create a small shelf that'll sit right there. The easy way I know to do that, and the reason why I did not just measure this distance up front, is because I want to create a little shim that's going to come down from this top ledge so I can make it flush here, and then I can bump up against it. And now make sure that I get it parallel all the way across. So the size of that shim is now this distance right here. And because I don't do math, I don't really care what that distance is. I just need to make it even with this. Now to prevent it from sliding around and moving around, what I want to do is put 2 shims up underneath here. The easiest thing to do there is just take your a shim, and as I've been doing, a little glue. Just use the board itself. Hold it for about 3 minutes. Then do the other side on this side, and that will wedge it in between this side and here and keep everything nice and parallel. Next up, I would like to put some runners on the bottom. That'll protect this, especially if you leave it on the ground and maybe you get moisture, or if you're on concrete, moisture coming through, it'll keep this bottom section dry. Also, I'm not wanting to put handles on the side, so having some runners there will give me a place for my fingers to come underneath. Because, generally when you carry something like this, you don't carry it like that. So having your fingers underneath it, having room for your fingers would just make sense. So I've got a piece of wood, let's make a few runners. Just like that, we have not only toolbox protection, but we have grab handles. Easy. So next up, I want to talk about our top. The design is You have a little locking piece, you slide it in this side, drop it over, drop down your locking piece, it's not coming out. And there are a lot of different tool chests out there that kind of work on this way of locking a lid down. But the biggest problem I see is this. You have the lid, you take it off, now what do you do with it? It just kind of takes up space. I know when I was working out of a Dutch tool chest, that little fold off section, I mean, you're always it's always in the way. Wouldn't it be nice if we could actually turn this into something of use while you are using your tool bench, instead of just sitting over leaning against the wall? So now, with a simple addition of a block of wood that's the same thickness as our side, and for lack of a better term, just a tool handle, well, now our top can serve multi-functions. I can take it off, and I can now hang it on the side. The advantage of that is, A, it's out of the way, though your toolbox will have to be kind of hanging over the edge of something. But now, all these tools that you have in here that you're having to reach for, if you're using them very commonly, like maybe your chisels, you now have a tool rack. A temporary tool rack for the tools that you are actually using at that moment. Works out pretty well. So, now we are done with our toolbox. Except for one thing. Time to decorate it. Anyone want to play with milk paint? Now, milk paint is a water-based paint, which means if it doesn't come to you in a powder ready for you to mix with water, it is not true milk paint. And there are a lot of reputable companies out there that are now selling milk paint in a can, in a liquid form. That ain't milk paint. It's either a latex or oil-based paint. The only thing they're really saying is it's milk paint colors. And truly, I don't know how they can even say that one, because one of two main companies that makes real milk paint, the old-fashioned milk paint company, you can buy it out of a bag like this right here. Well, they've done a lot of research on what the different colors are, but a lot of times it's just a best guess on what the ingredients that the old-timers said that they mixed up to get other shades. And they named those shades. So that, if one company is calling their paint, milk paint, a certain shade based on the naming of another company, it is all kind of funny, and none of them really know if it's the exact color that they were using way back when. Anyways, milk paint comes in a powder, and basically you mix it about half and half with water. So I'm going to just carefully measure out a certain amount. Precisely measure this stuff, guys. Then add in some water and mix it. And you're looking for kind of a consistency of, I would say, mustard, or a little bit thinner than mustard and ketchup. The first coat, though, I like to be quite a bit watery. I also like it to be a very dark color. Now, the person that I'm making this for asked for Federal Blue as a color, but by putting a black undercoat underneath it, it just seems to give it a lot more life. And yes, it's going to be a very watery finish, but this first coat actually soaks into the top layer of wood. That's one of the things I like about milk paint, is it doesn't just sit on top of the wood, it will actually soak in quite a bit. And because it soaks in, well, it's not like regular latex paint where you can get this kind of bead of material coming forward. You can kind of push it along. It works differently. but that has its pluses and minuses. I mean, you get to play around with it and decide. I like the fact that you don't really have to worry too much about little things like maybe a hair from your brush coming into it. Because it does soak into the wood, that hair will stay on top of the wood and you can just brush it off at a later date or sand it off. But as you can see, it doesn't quite flow like normal paint. And a lot of people will think that they've ruined their project after the first coat. But trust me, put a second, third coat on, it will all work out. Milk paint is designed to be layered. Now what's nice about milk paint is as soon as the water is dry, it's done. It's sealed. You're ready. You can sand it. You can do anything you want to it. I will say it will harden up over like a week or so, but it's ready to work right now. Now I am going to be doing this in Federal Blue. This black was just an undercoat. So between coats, you are going to want to sand it pretty well. Don't worry about wearing through it. Now, any paint you don't use, you can put in the refrigerator for about a day. After that, it's kind of like milk. I mean, it is made with proteins, so it will go bad, which is why you never buy milk paint that is already mixed, because it only lasts a short amount of time. If you don't refrigerate it, it'll probably be bad in a few hours. But luckily, you have more powder, and you can always make more. The stuff is cheap, and a few tablespoons will go a long way. Now in this toolbox, I am stopping after 2 coats, just because I kind of like seeing a little bit of black coming through. That's a personal preference. You can add more coats to it. The more coats you do, the more depth there's going to be. But here's something I think is really, really cool. The paint dries to the exact color of the powder. How many paints do you know are a different color than what's coming out of a can? Now, I am going to be putting oil on it, which it will darken up with that one to the color it was in the jar. So a lot of times when I'm mixing the paint, I'm looking at what it mixes up with when it's wet with water, and that's going to be the final color. But if you're not going to be putting a finish like oils on it, well, this is the color it's actually going to be. And with milk paints, you can get different powders to lighten it up. You know, if you mix in white, it's going to be a lighter blue. You can mix in darker blues to darken it up. You can mix in greens or whatever shade you want. And it's kind of like a little chemistry experiment. So it's kind of fun. You buy 20 different colors and you can make an infinite number of colors just by however you mix up the powder. And yes, when you mix a powder, the color of the powder will be the color of the paint. Now, a lot of people on the last coat, before they put a sealer or a finish, something like shellac or oil, or even a little bit of wax, or just leaving it plain, they'll take a paper towel, a brown paper bag, and kind of buff it out. I'm just going to sand it, just because I like the idea of wearing through a little bit of paint to make it look like an older one. And the finish is going to be a little bit better. If you don't do anything, no buffing or anything, it has a little bit of a roughness to it because that powder was a little bit chalky. So, you want to be like me, a light sanding, then blow off the shavings, and then put the protective sealant you want. I'm just going to be using a little bit of Mahoney's oil, which is just a 100% walnut oil that's been processed a little bit, just on the painted stuff. I'm not going to be using it on any of the natural wood. It's as simple as just wiping it on, wiping off anything that doesn't get absorbed. Now, because this is milk paint is now a surface finish, it's almost like a thin layer of concrete on top. It is not going to absorb much, but it will knock off a little bit of that dust. So if you're doing multiple pieces, different colors, use a different rag for each piece when you're finishing them. You don't want to transfer color from one to the other. But after the oil cures, the paint's set. And notice it's just the dust that's coming off. It's not, once it's dried, it's kind of like concrete. You can get it re-wet it. It's not going to turn back into soup. Well, I hope you enjoyed this little bonus video. Not really a lesson, as I said in the beginning, but there's a lot of tips and maybe ideas that you can use to outfit your own toolbox. Something that's small enough, light enough, that you can put in the corner or underneath in the closet, and then take it out to a park bench with a couple clamps, and you can do your woodworking out in the open. Or maybe set this up on the corner of your workbench with that little tool overhang so that you can use it and work right here. Or maybe even just build a small table next to it that can sit on permanently just to house your tools, keep them out of dust and keep them protected. It's a simple build, and really we did nothing more than cut 90 degrees, either taking, leaving, or splitting the line. So all this class 4 lesson was about was refining and working on your sawing skills, planing skills, and chisel skills. And I do hope you'll come back for class 5, where we're going to really refine your sawing and chiseling skills as we start playing around with dados, rabbets, and grooves. Now, if you got something out of this, please remember that content creators like me and others work on a value for value proposition. So down in the comments below are different ways you can help subsidize all this work for us. And remember that it is always worth the effort to learn, create, and share with others. Y'all be safe and have fun.